Ladies and gentlemen, Castle Nathria has arrived. It's time to raid. It was great to see on the PTR, Mr. Finn, all those raid guilds, those hungering 1%ers, desperate to get inside and start smacking their face against lag.
There's lots of 1%ers, it turns out.
There's a lot of them. Yeah, there's actually a lot. So many, in fact, it crashed every city they all moved to.
There weren't enough instant servers at one point.
That is true. Yeah, that is true. There are so many raiders ready to test that the game literally could not launch more instance servers, which created a lot of issues for people trying to raid test. They sent out a huge amount of invites for this the day before. Everybody got them all within like a 2-minute period as the invites just went flying out everywhere, and it did cause massive amounts of issues. Going into Castle Nathria testing. We got to test 4 bosses. We're covering 2 in this one, and then another 2 in a different video, so we're not just doing like a raid guide. First impressions of entering Castle Nathria, Mr. Finn?
It's so pretty.
See, I disagree massively.
Do you not like it?
You know what it is? Sanguine Depths, dude. That dungeon has killed this aesthetic for me.
Yeah, it is a little bit samey, but there's a couple of boss rooms that we've seen, that are super cool. I was a big fan
their
of them.
Backgrounds, right? Their backgrounds are amazing, where the bosses actually are. But I went in and it was them grey walls again with a bit of red, and I was like, that one dungeon that I dislike has killed this for me so much. I was like, it didn't grab me. Let me put it that way. It wasn't too bad.
It's no knife phase zone, but it's good.
That's true. That's true. It is. You compare it to some of the other zones, and Revendreth itself, by the way, which I still love Revendreth. And this ain't it. This ain't it. But it's fine. It's like Finn says, the boss rooms themselves, besides maybe I forget his name, Sludge Fist, were actually very, very cinematic. They are backgrounds, though. It's not really something we interact with, but the setting is kind of there for the boss rooms.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, our first boss we got to try, little bit of wonky info for you on this one, unfortunately, but it is the Hungering Destroyer. Now, whatever was happening with the Shadowlands beta over the last 3 weeks came to a head after the rest of the invites came in, as the servers were falling apart. They had to restart the servers twice during this raid test because nobody could play the game, which is a bit of a problem. It's a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
It is. So we had several players who literally couldn't even get into the dungeon. So I ended up tanking this one, Finn. Which you went Shadow Priest.
I did.
What?
I know.
What, are you trying to hurt yourself, or what was going on there?
I don't know, I'm a bit of a masochist, obviously.
Although it is popping off, our suspicions are kind of coming true. Yeah, its damage is very, very good, which is an issue. But for our raid test here, just to explain some of the strange things you'll see happening, is the lag was so bad that we had to cull our raid from the usual 26, 27 people down to around 15, and also ask the DPSs not to do any damage in order to test this. So a lot of it was just playing around with the mechanics, seeing how the boss works. We had no intention of killing this. If we dropped down to 10, I think we could have easily killed this fight, because the mechanics aren't particularly difficult. It does appear to be like boss number 3, at least in the dungeon journal, so you shouldn't expect... This is only heroic, obviously. You probably shouldn't expect something any wacky happening around boss number 3.
Yeah, it was a fairly simple one. Thankfully, there wasn't like a DPS check that we needed to meet, because we never would have been able to do it with the amount of lag that was going on. But yeah, it was kind of cool. There's some interesting mechanics in here. It's not entirely face roll.
So the general mechanics we go over here. So as a tank, I'll go over the tank stuff in, and you can tell us what was happening behind the boss's butthole, because I had to stare into its crotch all night. Was essentially it's got a basic tank swap. The boss itself, as it hits the tanks, actually gains a buff for doing more damage, but every time it hits the tanks, it also heals itself. Now, this wasn't working accurately. Our logs show some really strange things happening. We also figured that even if you get 100% dodge, which Rag, our monk tank here, was able to do, even if you avoided the hits, it still took the healing. So there's no way of cheesing that, from what we can see, is to have a high avoidance tank so it can't heal itself. It still does, and it will gain the damage buff. Although it didn't technically hit you, it still will gain the buff. And then it has a relatively normal tank buster called Overwhelm. It hits really hard, though. Like, I had about... So they scaled our gear to an appropriate level for heroic as far as they're concerned. And that gave me about 40 odd K HP. He hits for 22k. Yeah. So he's a bit of a chungus, this guy. You want to be doing somewhat regular tank swaps. Although we figured if you swapped like every 5 or 6 of his buffs, it wasn't too bad at all. And kept it pretty manageable while the healers dealt with the rest of the raid. So what's going on back there? I see you guys getting marked. I see you guys dropping balls that I had to run my face into. All kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it was... Initially, we started out just spreading around the room, and you get a debuff, essentially, that's like... Remember the Unat mechanic, where you couldn't be healed, but you would like leech health off people standing in the circle next to you?
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially that. So if you had a couple of people standing in your circle, it would keep you topped, and healers could top them. So that's a fairly simple mechanic. And then the other one, the balls that you drop, essentially... are just little circles around you that drop an orb that when you run into it, it does some damage, right? We figured it was much better for the tank just to soak them all, but you could, in theory, they only did like 7k damage, which is not a massive amount, so you could just soak your own, to be honest.
Yeah, it's got a strange thing. It's like the size of the eruption when it drops it is proportional to your missing health.
Yeah.
So they do need to, the healers do need to keep you topped for dropping these balls, but they obviously fill the room very quickly because you can see the size of the circles that are based on your missing health. So you can see, like certainly from my tank perspective, you can see when I have the debuff that the circle keeps changing shape if I'm tanking while having it, because obviously the boss is taking my health, so the circle gets much bigger, and then when they heal me back to full, the circle gets very small, and then they start filling these orbs up, and you don't want to explode on each other. So the way you could deal with this is, we found a huge amount of ways of just clearing the room of these things, because it happens fairly regular. One is you have the tank put AMS up, put Death's Advance on, something like that, where they can't give you, because they do knock you in the air when you hit them. So if you can avoid that, you can just run through them all. And we found that one tank, when they weren't tanking, could just clear the whole room. So they weren't a particularly big deal. It seemed more like something for the off tank to do. I guess that's what it felt like to us anyway. Here's something to do, but you can have anyone else do it. Hunters can run into it, Pallies could run into it and just clear it out. I assume on Mythic it'll be a much more of a thing.
Yeah, you can just immune through it just now, which makes it kind of easy. You can immune and then take a Warlock Gateway through all of them, which was kind of fun.
That was pretty funny, trying to get everyone to make one straight line. Yeah. Part of the giggles of raid testing is seeing how stupid we can handle some mechanics and make it work. As a couple of other things, though, you do get this debuff fin where you're going to drop a huge line that comes out of the boss.
Volatile ejection, I think it's called. But yeah, so it chooses 3 people, the boss, and it sends a beam through you, essentially. So the best way we found to deal with this was to stack on the boss's arse, basically, and then the 3 people just run out and make sure they don't cleave each other, because the other part of this mechanic is it puts a debuff on you that increases your damage you take by that beam by 500%.
Yeah.
So if you accidentally clipped someone behind you, or 2 of you with the beams stood on top of each other, one of you is definitely going to die, both of you are probably going to die. And if you drop it in the raid, there's a decent chance you hit someone with the debuff, so they're going to die as well. So the easiest way we found to deal with it was just everyone stack on behind the boss, and then the 3 people just run out in separate directions and make sure they don't cleave anyone. So fairly simple, but I can see if the room was filled with the orbs, this would become kind of difficult to manage. So I'm interested.
We do have to run away, don't we? We have one big heal that he does.
Yeah.
Where he will try and suck everybody into him. The closer you are, the more healing he gets.
Yeah.
So his health can... If you're too close, I think we did a pull where he was really close, and he just healed back to full straight away. And I was like, okay, so we really do need to run from this. Venthia, anybody? In order to sort this guy out, but... I don't think it's going to be any... Got to remember, guys, when we're doing raid testing, they tend to overtune the bosses quite a lot because they want to see how much damage you guys are doing, how much healing you can put up with, how much damage the tanks can take. So they generally do a lot more than when they actually come to live. If you ever look at any of our raid testing videos, you'll notice that when you went into heroic, you probably smashed it to pieces. And also, we're not optimized.
Not even
close. Some of our guys are. Because our gear gets scaled, we've definitely had some players go and craft level 100 gear that's perfectly optimized because it gets scaled up to do crazy damage. So please ignore the damage meters on this one. But a nice simple boss, Finn. Nothing particularly tricky about this one.
No, I don't think so. Kind of fun boss. There's stuff to do, which I like. It's relatively simple tank and spank boss other than that.
So let's go to one that has so much going on. It's actually insanely busy.
Yeah, this was nuts.
This one is nuts. We're going over to Lady Inerva, not Minerva, Lady Inerva Darkvein. which is one of the later bosses. I mean, the Dungeon Journal, it's like boss number 7. There are quite a lot of bosses inside Castle Nathria. This feels like an end of wing boss. It almost feels like they've built an ICC here, where there's going to be wings that we end up going to, very similar to Ice Crown. I don't know if you got that feeling from it, because the bosses towards the later bosses seem to turn up mechanics and setting a little bit more dramatically.
Definitely. This was a boss that's like, I think it's 6th in the Dungeon Journal. There's no way this is a 6th boss. This is crazy, this boss.
Well, unless
There's
it was
so
broken. It was doing some unintended things, let's say.
It was doing some additional stuff, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's
this
busy.
Is complex. This is complex. So you can see on the right-hand side of the screen the 4 bars that are filling up. And these are canisters that are located around the room. And you can see there's notches along the way, 3 of them. The canisters are separated into 3. So what happens here is Lady Inerva will focus one of those, and she's going to start filling it up. And once it goes past one of those notches, she modifies one of her 4 primary mechanics to do more. And that keeps going up. Now, what also increases with this is raid damage. Now, you can drain them on players, but that leads to all sorts of issues in of itself. So it's something you need to control, because the raid damage will get too high if you let them fill up too much. And of course, all her mechanics are amplified at that point. So that is the crux of it. You'll see these red canisters in the background. You'll see players running over and trying to click on them to drain them out and do all that kind of thing. Now, you're also going to see all of these 4 main mechanics happening simultaneously. So we've got a tank debuff, which is really, really nasty. It also fires out randomly once it hits notch 2 and causes detonations, so the tanks have to run away. I did end up tanking this. And hurts so much. And also gets thrown on random players and pets, and detonates on pets.
Yeah.
Which is not good, because it just wipes the raid because your pet had it and you didn't even notice.
That one was crazy. This one was the one that seemed bugged, actually, when we did test it. It seems like a difficult mechanic to manage regardless, because you need to spot heal a ton of players if it gets randomly applied to them. Applying to pets and stuff is clearly broken. It also just like randomly reapplied, even in the base level. So we were tank swapping, and the tank that didn't have aggro was still getting stacks. So that was a bit spicy.
Well, it was bad because they hurt so much. Like, we even had people swap to healer for this, just to heal the tanks. And that's even with 3 tanks sometimes. Because the debuff could be like, okay, I want to take, say, 3. And then it would go, nah, here's 5.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, bro. And you have to tank swap. So you're like, oh, come on, man.
I think Keg had 9 at one point.
He did. He was like, heal? 1 heal?
Half of his HP disappearing every second. But I think the level 3 of that was the stuff that we were really struggling with initially. Was when you essentially do like fall off damage when your dot expires. And if you had 4 or 5 stacks, it just killed everyone. So
it really did.
It just everyone just died instantly. So that seems like a difficult thing to manage. I think once it's tuned properly, it could be kind of fun for tanks to deal with.
Yeah, because you have to pay attention, because a few times, because we thought it was bugged, I was running out, and Alex is going, you don't need to run out yet, it's not gone past the notch. I'm like, bro, like, something is exploding in the raid, I'm not even risking this. I'm going to go stand over here, let it expire, and then we'll see what happens. Like, I am not risking it for the sake of it, but it was a fun little thing.
Yeah,
and the next mechanic was the orbs, Finn. Drawing a triangle.
Oh, yeah.
Which was real crazy. So you had these 3 little blood orbs appear, and then a little while later, 3 people will get marked, and you have to draw the shape and stand on the corners in order to get rid of these orbs that are going to be AoE pulsing on everybody.
Yeah, you have to like cut them, which is kind of cool.
You do, and then that grows in intensity as well. So as that one goes up through the notches, the second tier of it starts forming actual cutter beams, which you really need to be careful of, because they'll just slice you up. And once it goes into the third notch of those cutter beams start moving away from their target orbs and will actually start traveling.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
God.
They don't stay within the triangle either, from what I can see. Yeah, they just start cutting people in half. It's interesting.
They just detach and start traveling around.
Yep. That is spicy.
This fight is going to be utter madness. I'll whiz through the other 2 then. So she will just start throwing bottled anima at people, which you have to catch. So for those of you who did the Blood Council in ICC, that will make a lot of sense. And as that goes up in intensity, the bottles start bouncing. So you need to start catching them that way to make sure that works, which is...
Yep. And they leave like a pool on the ground when you catch them. So, yeah, that's going to be interesting. You're going to have to be facing a lot of things into walls, similar to Radin, I think, for that.
Yeah, this is going to get mad. And the fourth one, of course, is Sins and Suffering, where players are chained together. So we do have the common theme on a couple of bosses, actually, is being chained together inside of Castle Nathria, at least from the couple of bosses we've seen so far. But as that goes up, the beams form and start killing other people, and then as it goes up, more people are going to be chained together and also share the suffering between them. That is all going to happen as well. But other than that, just DPS the boss and you're going to be fine.
Yeah, there's ads as well, though.
Oh, God, I forgot the ads.
JK, there's ads also.
That can't be moved. I played Necrolord DK for this, thinking Slappy Hands is going to be clutch. And they can't be moved. But what they will do is chain cast Finn and just eradicate your raid.
Yeah, so weirdly, yeah. So the ad's level 1, it just spawns... I think it was 3 we were getting, 3 or 4, based on how many people we had in the raid. But 1 big ad, 3 little ones. The little ones are interruptible. The big one needs tanked. Otherwise, he just cleaves down the whole raid. But as that gains intensity, spawning an ad also leaves goo on the ground. And when the debuff expires, it then chains to people within 8 yards.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's not a massive raid encounter either. This is going to get super tight. There's a lot of space management on this fight, for sure. Which is
the same as another boss we're going to talk about in another video. They have made some chaos inside here. Yeah. But that is Lady Inerva. One thing I would take away from this is you can clearly see the class natural advantages, especially the bosses that can, the characters that can permanently just do massive amounts of cleave.
How you could cut down 10 enemies with a single blow.
I'm so strong in this fight because these ads can overwhelm you so fast, and that might not be the case on live. But it definitely felt like the fight was so much easier if you could just cleave.
Yep.
Absolutely non-stop, because you really just need all these things to be taken care of and get out there, because they respawn almost immediately after finishing the last pack. You're going to get more ads. They're going to be chained together. It's going to keep going and keep getting intense. It's very red, which is one comment I kind of want to throw in. It's so red that if you were Venthir, and a couple of our guys were Venthir, using sort of their Venthir abilities, they looked like mechanics, which really got on my nerves, because there was so much red flying around. I was seeing people like pop their, like the Warlocks popping their red one.
Yep.
And they become big red clouds themselves. I was like, are you going to blow up on me? Like, I'm really not even sure at this point whether you're going to do that.
That's such a good fight, though.
Yes. What do you think Mythic's going to look like? And I always bring this question up, Finn, and this is the first time I've done this with you, is sometimes we're not quite sure if we're actually kind of testing the Mythic level of the encounter when we do the heroic testing. And they're just kind of throwing more players at it to see what happens. We often do see mechanics we test in heroic not make it to heroic, but they end up being the Mythic encounter.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. It's hard to grasp. It is hard to tell.
I mean, the mythic mechanic on this is that when you drain one of the canisters, it goes into one of the other ones, basically. So you just like buff another ability. To be honest, this fight is just so crazy. There's so much to do. There's so much space management that's required. It's like, this is... Even that on heroic, if that's what it goes like on heroic, this is going to be a super fun fight, but it's going to be really hard, for sure.
Gun to your head, which mechanic would you rather deal with that's empowered?
The tank mechanic, because I'm not a tank.
You can forget it.
Yeah.
But you're probably not wrong, because that's all your mobility, but yeah, okay. I think that's fair, actually. The less I have to do as DPS, I can just blast the better.
I'm going to be at range, give the tanks all the stuff they want. Sure.
Awesome. Well, that is our first raid test, guys. The Hungering Destroyer and Lady Inerva Darkvein. We are going to be looking at Kael'thas Sunstrider next, and Mr. Sludgefist. So I hope you join us for that. But so far, Castle Nathria, if you had to give it a score, Finn, I like doing a score in the early testing. Hungering Destroyer?
A score. 7.
Oh, high. I would give that like a 5.
Yeah, I quite liked it.
The Lady Inerva Darkvein?
I'll give that an 8.
Yeah, I'm going to go 8 or 9 with this one. This is intense. And I like the intensity of my raid encounters that aren't just blasters. All right, we'll see you in the next video, guys. Thank you.
Cheers.